of folks that are really engaging in a way that I quite honestly haven't seen. We've seen big crowds at rallies. This feels different to me. I mean, these are Tuesday nights in Lorraine where they've never had one at a high school. They fill the auditorium and then they fill the gym. They're not coming to see me. I'm coming to see them. And I think that's what feels different.
Yeah, let me follow up on that one thing you said. One of the things I think that's been difficult for a lot of us who sort of do this professionally to navigate, even with people in our lives who are educated people who read the news, people who are, plugged in, is just when you're paying attention every moment, it's hard to convey how bad it is, what they are trying to do.
Yes.
And then there's this gap, this sort of alienating gap between what their aspirations are, which truly are like apocalyptically bad, in my humble opinion. And then just like the fact that we're all, you go get coffee, you pick up your kid, you're on vacation. Like, it's normal. And I'm wondering how you sort of are thinking about navigating that as someone who is, an elected representative of the people of Minnesota, someone who talks to people and tries to sort of, communicate.
Yeah. Well, you want to be a calming presence. Look, I've done this through a global pandemic. I did it through the unrest of George Floyd. And you want to convey factual information and you want to normalize. Your first segment couldn't have been more spot on. I've been using
Donald Trump's tariffs have been an absolute disaster. What the Wall Street Journal called the stupidest trade war in history doesn't even begin to cover it, because we're seeing outcries for Donald Trump to just stop this idiotic economic agenda from elected Democrats, but Republicans as well. And it's not just public pressure. Donald Trump is now facing legal liability from one of his least favorite governors out there. That is Gavin Newsom, who triggered Donald Trump into a posting meltdown with the lawsuit he is bringing against him and his tariffs. We're going to cover it all. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we get into this breaking news from Governor Newsom, I want to hear what he had to say about Donald Trump's tariffs just a couple of days ago.
But let's talk about those red states. Aren't they disproportionately the ones impacted by these tariffs? I mean, to your point, there's going to be some tears here. And I appreciate the larger geopolitical and what you're trying to argue for ultimately coming out on the other side. But this transition is not overnight. The transition will come at real cost and consequence. Let's just be pragmatic. Up in Minnesota, Michigan, in New York, they're looking at $100 more a month on electricity bills as it relates to the retaliatory nature of what happened.
That's a threat. That's if it goes through some.
But that's just one example. I mean, every economist looks at the impacts of these tariffs. Obviously, California will be disproportionately impacted.
We did this, Governor. We did the most significant tariffs we've ever done on the Chinese Communist Party, and I think there may be some dislocations in the short term, but in the intermediate term, I think it's really the way you get to the sunlit uplands of really having back to the American plan of, remember, world-class industrial manufacturing that generates so many other opportunities.
I think it's a mutual goal for all of us, but industrial policy, which I think is missing a little bit from the Trump agenda, with targeted tariffs, I understand, but broad tariffs without an industrial policy to back it up is where I start to lose.
Now, I have certainly not been the biggest fan of Gavin Newsom's podcast, having on a bunch of right-wingers to kind of, suck up to them a little bit, but maybe give them a platform that they certainly don't deserve. But that right there is exactly what Gavin needed to be doing through all of the episodes of his podcast, debunk the lies. Gavin is great at that. He should be going into conservative spaces, more than bringing conservatives into liberal spaces. But that is for a different video. The point he made is the one we have to continue to communicate. That Donald Trump's tariff plan is not a plan. There is no goal. There is no end outcome that he is clearly working to. One day, it's money doesn't matter and the stock market tanking is good. The other, it's we're bringing jobs back. The next, it's this is a negotiating tool. No one knows what is happening, and neither does Donald Trump. Take a listen to what he had to say recently about his own plan.
Our country was the strongest, believe it or not, from 1870 to 1913. You know why? It was all tariff-based. We had no income tax. Then in 1913, some genius came up with the idea of let's charge the people of our country, not foreign countries that are ripping off our country. And the country was never that kind of wealth. We had so much wealth, we didn't know what to do with our money. We had
So, this is the stupidest part of it all. Do you like the tariffs or not? Donald Trump has been talking about how he's going to negotiate a deal with China, how he's having 70 conversations at once with all these countries, reaching out to him, who, by the way, the White House isn't telling us what countries those are. So that's a really good sign. Girlfriend from Canada, kind of behavior there from the White House. But is it? Are they bringing in money, or are they a negotiating tool? Again, Donald Trump doesn't know. They are just harming us. And that is why Gavin Newsom just filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration and their tariffs that we're going to take a look at, and then see Donald Trump's meltdown of a post. California sues the Trump administration over the president's sweeping tariffs. Governor Gavin Newsom said the tariffs are being disproportionately felt in California, which he said is the top manufacturing state in the country. California Governor Gavin Newsom and State Attorney General Rob Bonta said Wednesday they are suing the Trump administration in federal court over Donald Trump's sweeping U.S. tariffs. The lawsuit, filed in the District Court for the Northern District of California, argues that Donald Trump doesn't have the presidential authority to unilaterally impose tariffs using the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. According to Newsom's office, the state is asking that the court declare the tariffs void and block their implementation. According to the governor's office, announcing the lawsuit on his latest podcast episode, the Democratic governor said that Trump doesn't have the unilateral authority to impose one of the largest tax increases in U.S. history, emphasizing the impact of tariffs and potentially leading to higher prices. Newsom continued, impacts of these tariffs are disproportionately being felt here in California, the #1 manufacturing state in America, a state that will be significantly impacted by the unilateral decision by the president. Bonta said in a statement Wednesday that the president's tariffs are not only deeply troubling, it's illegal. Californians are bracing for fallout from the impact of the president's choices, from farmers in the Central Valley to small businesses in Sacramento and worried families at the kitchen table. The game the president is playing has very real consequences for Californians across our state. He said, I am proud to go to bat alongside Governor Newsom to fight for California's vibrant economy, businesses, and residents. The lawsuit argues that Trump can't use the International Economic Emergency Powers Act to unilaterally impose tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, or create an across-the-board 10% tariff. The governor's office says Trump has imposed tariffs on most foreign countries, with China facing the largest amount, 145%, and other nations facing 10%. After the president backed off last week from implementing higher duties for 90 days, Trump touted the tariffs while speaking to reporters at the White House on Tuesday, saying, we're making tremendous amounts of money, taking in billions of dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs from other countries that for many decades just ripped off the United States. And it's time that we not allow that to happen. Yes, the tariffs have always been and will always be illegal. It is Congress's authority to impose taxes, which is what tariffs are. Donald Trump cannot do that. And the justification that this is some national security concern, when, in fact, the real national security concern that he should be looking at is Pete Hegseth drunk texting war plans. There's no basis for that. But Trump clearly doesn't think so, because he had himself a little meltdown this morning after the news came out. Trump wrote, the United States is taking in record numbers in tariffs, with the cost of almost all products going down. Not true, including gasoline, groceries, and about everything else. Likewise, inflation is down. Also not true. Promises made, promises kept. Promises broken, Donald. Promises made. Yeah, I don't think the promises were kept. I think that's why your approval rating is so low. And this is not the only thing that Donald Trump is doing to break the law and screw himself over and continue to make sure that his approval rating goes down. Another Democratic governor spent last night calling out Donald Trump's disgusting and illegal mass deportation plan. That was, someone who I think is a better governor, who does a better job with his social media. That's Tim Walz, right here.
An awakening, if you will, of folks that are really engaging in a way that I quite honestly haven't seen. We've seen big crowds at rallies. This feels different to me. I mean, these are Tuesday nights in Lorraine where they've never had one at a high school. They fill the auditorium and then they fill the gym. They're not coming to see me. I'm coming to see them. And I think that's what feels different.
Yeah, let me follow up on that one thing you said. One of the things I think that's been difficult for a lot of us who sort of do this professionally to navigate, even with people in our lives who are educated people who read the news, people who are, plugged in, is just when you're paying attention every moment, it's hard to convey how bad it is, what they are trying to do.
Yes.
And then there's this gap, this sort of alienating gap between what their aspirations are, which truly are like apocalyptically bad, in my humble opinion. And then just like the fact that we're all, you go get coffee, you pick up your kid, you're on vacation. Like, it's normal. And I'm wondering how you sort of are thinking about navigating that as someone who is, an elected representative of the people of Minnesota, someone who talks to people and tries to sort of, communicate.
Yeah. Well, you want to be a calming presence. Look, I've done this through a global pandemic. I did it through the unrest of George Floyd. And you want to convey factual information and you want to normalize. Your first segment couldn't have been more spot on. I've been using, and I made this statement at one time, the road to authoritarianism is littered with people telling you you're overreacting. I have had hair on fire for a while, and I know there's, we can't swing at everything. He's just out there flooding the zone to distract you from the real stuff he's doing. I have come to understand what Donald Trump, what pops into his head and he says, he's going to carry it out. Once again, he talked about the tariffs. He talked about, he's going to deport people. And this whole thing with Mr. Abreu Garcia, it's that old wisdom and terrifying is if you're not speaking up for this man, there will be no one left to speak up for you. Whether it's Chris Krebs that they're going after for simply I know Chris Krebs. He's a Republican. He was there to provide election security in 2020. He did it, and all he said was it was a fair election. They're coming. They're going to do this. So I think the biggest thing is I'm convinced now he's not going to listen to the courts. And I've been saying there is a finer firewall, and it's the people. That's why these rallies, that's why these town halls, that's why this engagement, it's not meant to scare people. It's meant to empower people, because I will tell you what, Republican members of Congress are not afraid of the people. They're afraid of Donald Trump. They are starting to become afraid of the people. That's why they're not doing these town halls. They need to be afraid and come forward. I was a member of Congress. You need to stand in front of them and say why gutting the VA makes sense. Why did you allow an unelected official like Elon Musk be able to take away Social Security, to be able to get that data? So I think what's happening, Chris, is that it's not about terrifying people. It's about just simply and very calmly showing them they are headed towards this. Donald Trump has said it. What terrifies me is he has talked in the past about nuclear war being winnable. He thinks the tariffs, and you think that's terrifying? Look what he talks about. And if he says it, he plans on doing it.
Yeah, just to clarify, and I know you mean this because of the times we live in, you mean politically afraid of the people as opposed to physically afraid of the people, which is an important distinction. Given the world we live in. I know you mean that. I just want to be very clear about that.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that, because I will guarantee you that clip is already on Fox News to try and say the radicalness is coming from the Democrats. It's being afraid of the people speaking their mind to them. They're afraid of the voters voting them out because they voted for these bad things. But they are more terrified that Donald Trump will say something about them or primarying them. And I don't know what it is about these people clinging to these jobs. The job of a congressman is a privilege, but it ain't the greatest job in the world. And I don't know why you're giving up your dignity, the responsibility you have to hold that job. But you're right. They think that they can disrespect the voters. And that's the feeling I got in these town halls. Don't disrespect us. Come and ask questions. And just to be clear, I did one in Texas, and there was a gentleman there that was opposed to vaccines. And he stood up and asked his question and said that. And I responded that, the research shows that. You've got measles in Texas. We should be addressing them. But it's not. These are folks that just want to be heard, even though their issues weren't agreeing with mine. So I don't know. This is the time to do this. I'm going to thank all the people who are out there, all the people. And you just had Senator Van Hollen, who there's nobody better. He has to speak up.
What is happening to Abreu Garcia needs more attention. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be called out. I do not want to see a single Democrat be scared to bring up the human rights violation that's happening because they don't think their immigration speech is message tested enough. And it's an issue that's not that popular for Democrats. No, defending human rights is popular. Let's not back down from a fight about what we know is right. Let's call it out. That's what Tim Walz is doing. That's what we're doing on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments.